We live in a world that most people do not realize is completely upside down. And what we think is success is actually tearing us apart on the inside. And we're empty, and we're looking, we're seeking something meaningful, something sacred. And when we find that shamanic path, we enter a doorway into a completely altered reality where life shows up extremely differently, more beneficially, with more guidance, with more support, with more mystical moments and revelations, with a connected web of life all around us. And today's guest, Angell Deer, is a mystic, a medicine man, and an author of the newest book, Becoming the Medicine. And he shares so many beautiful shamanic tools and experiences to get you started on your path of opening up this right side up world for yourself. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show. Soul Nectar Show.
Well, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Soul Nectar Show. That show where we gather together around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is greater than us, to the big mystery beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably to a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we're doing on this blue dot floating in space. And I'm your host, Kerri Hummingbird, and I love having these conversations week after week. And today it's really special for me because we're going to be visiting with my guest here, Angell Deer. And we're going to be talking about shamanism. And my own experiences of shamanism was that it just turned upside down world right side up. I was realizing that the life before I found my path was very inside out. It was backwards. And it was no wonder I was so confused and in so much doubt and in so much pain and struggling to make sense of everything around me, was because it was upside down. And when I embarked upon my first time I follow my soul's guidance, you guys know that first time, just access it within you, or like, okay, this message is coming from something bigger than me and I need to follow it. And from that first moment that I followed that voice, and it called me to leave my 2 decades marriage. It called me to walk out of psychotherapy and say, that's not working. If it hasn't worked in 2 decades, it's not my solution. And, then about 6 months, 8 months later to stop the not feeling pills and to say, well, if that hasn't worked after 13 years, then that also is not my solution. And to really step forward into a whole new way of perceiving life. And as some of you may or may not know, the life before, the upside down world, the way that they characterize, the way that they classify, the way that they make sense of the human experience is through something called the DSM, which is a psychotherapy tool. It's a massive book of all the things that are wrong with you and the labels associated with that. And so that was part of my journey as well, was, having this time where I was like, there's something wrong with me. From the time I was 15, I was getting these diagnoses, like there's something wrong with Kerri. She's not like everybody else. There's something wrong. And really believing that because, the innocence of it, like, well, these people have, they have degrees and they have, permission and authority to give you this information. And some of you in my audience are psychotherapists. So, like how this rolls. And at some point you wake up and go, I don't really think I should be giving those diagnoses out. And then when we go to right side up world, all of a sudden there's a different explanation. It's like, oh, well, here's your gene keys chart. Here's your human design. Here's your animal spirit guide. Here's your astrology. Oh, you have a Neptune complex. That's why you need to learn about boundaries in this lifetime. It's like the whole picture changes. And not only does it change, but it opens up. It opens up. And I'm bringing all this up because I know today's guest is going to give us so much deep, rich context for the journey on the other side of that yes. When you make the leap and you say, you know what, this doesn't sit right in my body, what they're saying to me. I feel like I need to change. I need to be courageous. And I need to step out of what everyone else is doing just because they're doing it and say, you know what, I feel like I need to follow this inner thing that's happening and see where it leads me. And so, yeah, Angell, welcome to the show. I want to tell people a little bit about you, but it's a fantastic human. Angell Deer is a mystic, a medicine man, an animist teacher, ordained minister, beekeeper, because bees are important, people, and international speaker, and a sacred disruptor. I like that. I'm a sacred disruptor too. And he's the founder of Sacred Paths. And you just moved. You just moved from New York, which I know is hard for you, your sanctuary space, and you just moved back to France. So you just came out also with the book not long ago, Becoming the Medicine. And I just finished most of this book. It's a delicious piece of shamanistic introductory to the realms. It's like, this is what shamanism really is about. This is what that connection with the medicine, becoming the medicine means. And I love that you say becoming the medicine. I say inner medicine. That's mine. That's my book and my teachings is inner medicine. So there's like this potency around this word medicine. And what does medicine actually mean? And it's not, I don't think, the lab coats and the it's maybe a form of medicine, but I feel like there's this deeper medicine we're talking about here. So welcome. I said a lot, and I'm so excited to have you here on the show with us.
Thank you, Kerri. I'm very glad to be with you. Yeah.
So you shared some very mystical, beautiful transmissions in your book, but can you tell us, just a little nutshell for those who aren't familiar with you, a little bit about what you do today? I gave some labels, but can you tell a little bit more about what you do? And then maybe share with us how you got started on that path.
Yeah, all those labels, it's always difficult to define ourselves. And I don't find any of them that really fit. Ultimately, we're all very unique and different. But I would say I work with land, spirit, communities, people, animals, the world that is alive, all the world. So the humans and the more than humans. And from a perspective or an ancient lens of those ancient traditions, specifically more with Andean cosmology, so tradition from the Andes, because that's where I've been studying for the longest, almost 2 decades now, that I think, as you beautifully said, can probably turn your world upside down, but also give you grounding and sanity back, can make you feel imperfectly whole and a beautiful work in progress at the same time. And I've been, studying and teaching those ways for, over a decade in my center in New York and now in France. But I'm really passionate about the mystery, this aliveness, this world that is out there, as we say, but also in there. That is, I think, something humans, mystics, philosophers, prophets, a lot of people across millennia and across every kind of civilization have been interested in. We are very funny in a very funny time because we are this very modern civilization, but that only existed for, not I think 0.1% of the story of humanity. But for 99.9% of the time of humanity, we were this person that was alive and in connection to the rest of the world beyond the humans, that understand how to talk to trees, that could read rivers and waters and clouds, that could communicate with animals. And it was something completely normal. And I think what we call normal today is really abnormal. It's really something that is very odd. And it's an experiment. It doesn't seem to work really well for most people. Once you start looking a little bit deeper than the surface of modernity, and but yeah, I'm interested in that. I'm interested how we can really ground ourselves in a world that is very ungrounded, feel sane. I mentioned insanity and sanity. I think it's really important. How do we find our sanity when nothing makes sense, where what we hear and see breaks our hearts and make us want to run away? How do we stay? How do we stay present? And how do we keep opening our heart in a world that is so designed for us, closing our hearts, numbing ourselves, and disconnected from each other, beyond just nature?
Yeah, it's beautiful what you say about returning to some sanity.
Mm.
And the Andean traditions, I feel like they were able to maintain access to truth, to Mother Earth, and I would say most of Peru, most of those cultures, the Shipibo, the Caro, and I study with both of those, and they're amazing in how their presence is so powerful. And they also don't seem to get trapped up in story. Like, I feel like our Western consciousness, we get really trapped up in story, and we build a lot of webs around story that create reality. We don't even realize we're doing it, I don't think. But they don't tell stories that way. They don't. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. You've worked with some of the shamans. They don't often speak the language, like they don't speak English, for example, on purpose, I think, because they don't want to know our story. They can just see the energy, right? And they can work with the energy, but they don't need our story.
Mm. Yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, obviously we're creators of meaning. We need meanings, and uh, we want to understand our place in the universe and who we are in that process and who we are on Earth. And I think stories can be beautiful, and prophecies, and there are a lot of ancient stories in many ways. But I think what you're trying to say here is more like we use the mind a lot, and therefore we lost connection to the bodies, to the rest of the bodies, to our bellies, to our skin, to the feeling that comes through the waters instead of the wind, which is the mind. So that's how I would relate to really what you say. I think we are definitely trapped in a story, and politicians are, and we all are, to some degree, we all carry some kind of stories. But it's often just a story. It's not often a reality. And I think what I found in the Andes and in my teacher, my teacher is very extraordinary medicine man, but first and foremost, he's a farmer and a beekeeper too. He grows seeds. He works with corn and quinoa and coca and other plants. But he grows it for his community, and that's primarily his role. And yes, also he works with sacred medicine and he does other things. But if you were to meet him, life is more simple, I think. They don't need to do very elaborate things to understand the mystery and be in the mystery. You can just hold one pot of one seed of corn and be in deep communication with that without a very elaborate rituals or ceremony. And I think they are teaching us, those elders, those wisdom keepers, those people that have kept those lineage alive, to be really in awe and presence of the magic in our everyday life. And I think that's what I really love about that. Those teachings, they give us a very different kind of map than the map that we're following in this Western world, which is all about, intensity and fireworks and experiences instead of presence. And there is something there that we are kind of chasing in all those experiences. And sometimes plant medicine can become that too, that I think miss the point about the cultural embodiment and presence that is really the base of their healing and the community, those medicine and the beautiful ceremony. I mean, the extraordinary, but they really like the cherry on the cake, really the foundational work is something very different that we are starving for, which is community, which is grief rituals, which is to be able to connect as humans around food and to be able to forage together, to understand what plants, can heal this ailment or not. Being able to look at the stars at night in the sky, which we hardly see anymore in the Western world because of the light. So I think we've lost, all of that, and we're looking for it because we know or not. I think most of the time we know, but most people don't know that we are sick, that we are not well. We're not well, not just as countries or as communities, but also as individuals, obviously. And there is a profound suffering right now on Earth. It's pretty evident, everywhere you look in so many ways.
Yeah, it expresses in a lot of ways. And I'm really, as you were speaking, I was thinking, the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. And when they fly in the sky, then there'll be peace. And, I feel like the Caro people, they've got that condor medicine really grounded, really secure. But there's also this weaving together of the Western world, so not to say that like it's all like there's one that's right and one that's wrong, but it's more like there's a balance to be had. And so for us, with Western, yes, we've had this opening up of the mind, of the ability to intellectualize things, the ability to imagine, the ability to weave stories and share our perspectives and use our throat chakras, and then in the indigenous traditions, more the ability to be with my body, to be in community, right? And the Western being more to be individualistic, to have your own path, to follow your own guidance, to kind of break codependency. And then in the indigenous, it's more like creating community and connection with the land. And so I feel like these things all go together. They weave together somehow. And I feel like we're all individually, potentially, those that step out on this path as Western people, we're asking, what's the balance? Because there is truth to being sovereign, and there is truth to being integrated with the whole. There's truth in both spaces.
But I also say also sovereignty comes from interdependency, this idea that we're independent and somehow sovereign it's very difficult for people to hear when I say that, but it's not really true, because the fact that I'm here right now, can breathe, is because there is trees right outside. The fact that even that I'm alive, it's because there are millions of bacteria in my intestine that are keeping me alive. So this idea of, I think, because there is a very high level of oppression in the West on so many aspects of our life, I think people really take freedom as this, need to break through and to find ourselves. But really the indigenous way is telling us that there is no really individual, it's all community-based things. And you cannot survive as a person. You cannot really do anything. And nothing that we really have around us right now on this house that I'm in, and my phone or this computer, I mean, it's all dependent on so many hands and so many people and so much knowledge. So because we've got so extreme, even in the spiritual space, in this individual transformation, I think we've missed the point, and we're missing the key elements of true transformation, which is always collective. And there's literally no liberation of the self without a liberation of the whole. And people are trying sometimes to heal. I can see very deeply things that they're hurt from, that maybe happened to them, obviously, in their life. But what's often missing is the community component, or the healing of the family, or the healing of the greater collective around. And I think that's usually blocked the healing ultimately. And it doesn't matter how many ceremony you're going to do. At some point, it needs to open. It needs to return to something bigger. You know, and you can pray for Mother Earth, but if you don't really take care of her and plant trees and restore lands or clean rivers, you know, it's kind of an empty prayer. My teacher would say, you know, stop praying, just do.
Yeah, just go
So I
do it.
think, and that's the individual mind, right? It's like what am I getting from this transformation or this wisdom? It's a bit what I try to express in my book in Becoming the Medicine. And maybe, I don't know, I mean, you almost finished it, so maybe you can tell me how you feel about it. But I try to communicate that it's not just an individual process, it's much more of a collective process. And I think it's our suffering and our feeling for the collective suffering that really bring us into this line of work and into this curiosity towards those traditions that have survived great evil and great complex transformation of the earth even.
Yeah, and it is, I do feel like what you're saying is true. There's been many points along my path that I thought this suffering cannot all be mine. Like, that what I'm feeling is not all mine. Like, I'm not creating all of this. And I started realizing that that it was familial, it was ancestral, it was collective, it was the environment, it was things I was packed. I have a deep Scorpio in my 12th house too, so my astrology explanation of that is that I was like picking up on collective energies at all times, and I think many of us do. And if we're empathic or we're healers, we feel it. And you know, you might start to wonder, like, what's wrong with me? Because that's what the Western world says to you, is like, well, we're all fine, what's wrong with you? But if you're disconnected, if the majority is completely disconnected from their feelings, they're completely disconnected from the land and the impact of what we're doing to the earth and what we're doing to each other through these systems, if we're disconnected from that and we can't even feel our emotions because we're taking not feeling pills, you know, because we want to get through the day and we don't want to have to feel anything because it's so inconvenient, then those of us who are feeling are like, this is intense. Like, this is heavy at times. It's like waves of grief. It's waves of anger. It's just like this, I don't know, this soup, right? We're in this human consciousness soup, and it's got all of these energies that float around. And so a lot of what, you know, that I support people with to help me was like getting really good boundaries. So I'm clear, like discernment. This is mine. This piece is mine. This piece is collective. Not that I'm not going to work on the collective piece, but it's just like, so I can have some discernment within myself, and then practicing the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally. Things like that have really helped to sort of open up understandings about where all these energies are coming from and what do I do with them? And am I just here to witness it? Am I here to work my hands in the clay of it, you know, what, and that's a different answer every moment, you know, because there's different things. It's very complex. There's a lot untangling and unweaving. And then we have this opportunity, if we can get deep enough within ourselves. And that's, I think, a point that you like to make too, is like getting really deep and grounded in yourself. We can find the guidance for the seeds that we're going to plant, you know, what we're going to build next. But that takes time, it takes discernment, it takes unpacking, it takes stillness. And our Western cultures don't really support a lot of stillness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we cannot, and you know, it's very hard for most people to have moments for themselves. And even when we're with ourselves, we might be on our phone or, you know, doing something else. So I think
Distraction.
having true moments of just presence, to be with our breath and not needing or wanting anything to happen or having any sign or any download or whatever that is, to just be able to experience the presence of being alive. I think it's something most people don't experience.
And
They don't even know what I'm talking. Sometimes I talk about it and they're really like just sitting there. But I'm thinking of that, it's like I said, but that's already the problem, right? We don't have a capacity to be like the deer or the oak tree or other presence in the natural world that really are just so aligned with who they are and their essence, that they're just sitting in their essence, and that's enough. There is no other needs. And because we are disconnected from our essence, obviously we are feeling that tension and we're unrestful. We can't really sit because we are not really clear on what it is that we are. And so we're always searching, and there's this rambling. And that might come at just distractions or wanting to do something or eat chocolates or watch Netflix. But in fact, the reality of it behind it is a deep craving for meaning and presence. And that's when you really get to the heart of it, it's terrifying to realize that most people live that way. And that even for me, sometimes, I might have a day where I don't experience that because I'm just too busy. But I'm really conscious about, wow, it's really hard to be that presence in this world with all its demand. Because I need also to pay rent and do other things, and I'm a father, right? So how do we do that within the system that is not designed at all, like you say, to nurture such life force, such kind of presence in the world?
Yeah, and I feel like, one of the things your book talks about is the importance of getting into an altered state of reality, right? So moving yourself into an altered state of reality where and that's a lot of what shamanism is about, is being able to perceive life through a very different lens, through a lens that's much deeper, that is expansive, and that has messages, right? Like energies and messages from aspects of us that are not physical. And that's really what's happening in forests and mountains, is that they are physical. Mountains are physical, but mountains also have spirits that infuse them with life and wisdom. They have the spirit of the mountain, and a lot of the Carol teachings are around connecting with the Apus, or the sacred mountains, and the spirit of that mountain, and working with the spirit of that mountain, and asking for guidance. And as you have talked about, I'd love for you to share your relationship with deer. And if you want to share the story of how you got your name, Angell Deer, because I think people would be curious, did you born with that name? And people ask me, were you born with your name, Kerri Hummingbird? It's like, well, it's a spirit name. And what's more true, the spirit name or the one I got physically coming in here? I feel like your name is a frequency, right? And this is coming from you tapping into an altered state of reality where something more deep and profound and true about you came to meet you and asked you to make a physical change in your physical reality because of that deep understanding of yourself.
Yeah, when you think of it, being able to have the point of view of something that is not you about your reality can be life-changing, right? Imagine that I could give, I don't know, to an ant, my perspective as a human about where it is and what's going on. The ants would probably be like, wow, that's a really different perspective, or that the tree could give to the ant, and maybe they do, right? So the altered state for me is that it's like if I can go into places or into communication with other beings that live in this reality or other realities, and have a point of view about a question, about, even just a reality, say, what is this? And have a different being giving me that reality. It can really enlarge my vision. And instead of making decisions about my life, like you said, I recently moved from the United States to Europe this summer. It was not just a process of, I feel cold and I have this deep intuition. There was a few years of inquiry into the spirit realm and many other ways to get information until it was a clear yes. But many often people, it's like, I just had this information, I need to do that, right? But sometimes you don't know, is this your fear? Is this really spirit talking? Or is it just yourself talking to yourself? Sometimes my teacher says, I said, do you know it's spirit talking? So the altered state of consciousness, they allow to have different point of view, and then to be patient, to take your time before you make drastic life changes, but to have this information. So my name change was part of a process like that. It's not something that, okay, I wake up, I'm going to be called that way. there was definitely an encounter one day during a tobacco dieta. But it was interesting because tobacco is not a psychoactive medicine. It creates an altered state of consciousness, but like, if you eat a lot of garlics, you are going to be in an altered state of consciousness. And any plant that you eat in big quantity is going to give you a different experience of your body and reality. But in that morning after the ceremony the night before, I was, resting, and I was just, I think, writing in my room that morning. And then this deer came. And I don't really have visions of spirit in my awakened normal life. I can hear or feel or perceive, but it's not my primary way of connecting to spirit. But this was very obvious. In my room, there was this very big, large, white stag. And I'd never seen a white deer before. And I didn't know much their significance at the time when it happened. And he started sharing with me why I need to change my name, not just my first name, but also my last name. And, I was puzzled. I think the whole encounter maybe lasted a few minutes. It was not a very long encounter, but it was obviously very marking because I've never thought about changing my name. And it felt very bizarre, and it felt very odd too. The name, the name was interesting because it felt really true at the same time that it felt very odd and bizarre. It's like it's really out of nowhere, and at the same time it feels like home, despite it's a home you've never visited in this lifetime. So anyway, this process then of name change take many years, but there was many other encounters that kind of led me to, okay, I need to really do that. And I think beyond just an energy that comes with a name, definitely there is a whole lineage behind name. There's lineage of deers, not just on this planet, on another planet. There is wisdom keepers on this planet alive today that works with those lineages. But there is also, and that's what deer taught me, over the years after that, a lot of responsibility. Because the deer, it can call itself a deer. It knows how to walk like a deer, how to be like a deer, how to be literally this living presence of that name. It can't really betray that name. I think name change, I always tell people, say, you can change your name, but just be careful. It's not going to come just with gift. It's going to come with a lot of complexity and a lot of ask and potentially struggle and potentially things you didn't think of at the time. But it's definitely going to come with big sacrifice and ask of you because you're committing to something else. And, in France, I use my other name here also. So it's interesting to see when I'm using one name or the others and what energy comes and how to navigate that. But the deer, they kind of boss me, kick my ass a little bit. Years down the line, 4 or 5 years later after that, in a ceremony where they came to the great, you already understand our energy, and they were giving me all those teachings, and I could write a whole encyclopedia about the spirit of deer, and maybe one day, who knows. But they were very specific. They say, now you really, as you say your name, people are going to think of us. You're kind of an envoy in the human world, and I never thought of that. And they say, there are many things you're going to have to do in order to walk like us, and be careful with that. Mm-hmm. And we're going to ask, and they've been coming, and asking, step by step. They understand that we are, not on top of the intelligence on the planet. I think animals really understand that, even if we think we are. And they kind of, babysitting us basically and teaching us slowly. And they are kind and patient, but they're also fierce and demanding. And yeah, they're asking us to really step up. Ultimately, to serve the greater collective. It's not about me changing name. It's not about me carrying a certain name. It's a lot of spirits, animals, and plants and trees that are right now connecting to humans in many forms and ways, in many kind of lineages, not just, the shamanic practices, in order to transform the greater collective, in order to make this earth a beautiful place again and stop destroying it. So it's really the earth saving herself, right? It's like this process of remembering, and we are being swallowed into it with or without our consent. That's why also freedom is funny to me, because ultimately I think there's something much bigger that is guiding our life. And we might just be like the bees that thinks it goes all around the plants, but ultimately it's really the plants that are making the bees their slave. You know, when you really study bees and plants relationship, it's really the flowers that are in charge and not the bees. And I feel it's a bit like that with us. We think we are in charge, but it's really Gaia ultimately that is kind of moving us around and teaching us around for our own survival, for our own transformation and evolution.
Yeah, I feel like there's also this piece. I've been working with several different animal allies, but one of them is Jaguar. And it feels like Jaguar is always supporting me to discern the truth of things, to work on my confidence, because confidence has been one of the things that's been challenging for me in this life. And also to let go of myself, like what you're saying, like to release who I think I am or what I think life is. And that kind of goes hand in hand with my study of the Toltec teachings of the mitote, you know, knowing that I think Don Miguel Ruiz says something like, believe only 10% of what you think and 50% of what someone else says. And I think that's true, because there's so much mental chatter. And I know from the energy work that I do that it's because thought is thing, you know, so thought just kind of moves around the planet, you know, and then you could hear a bunch of thoughts that really have nothing to do with you particularly, but it's just thought that's in the space. And so, like, not taking it personally, again, one of my major things I'm working on in this life is just going, oh, there's this thought. Oh, where is that coming from? Is that for me? Is that just passing by? Is that for me to witness? And then to even like conceiving of identity, like you changed your name based on many spirit visions and working with the deer. Also, I changed my name based on a visitation from Hummingbird. That was so powerful. The same thing. I don't normally see things like that. I feel or I sense, but I don't get the big visions, you know, normally. And that was such a big vision. It was life changing. It was like spirit. It was so profound that it was calling me to it was calling me to go, you know what? Who do you think you are? And as I took that name, there's been a lot of releasing of identity, a lot of surrender. And I feel like the identity that many of us have cultivated is based in conditioning of our family systems or our inheritances or our society or the programming that, as you call, empire uses to program us. That conditioning is actually false identity. And so when we go to something like an animal ally, like Hummingbird came for me, deer came for you, it's like that ally is here to realign us to a more truthful, real, authentic self that is probably the timeless self that has lived many lifetimes, many throughout, you know, Earth's existence, and now is being called forth to be present here now. And some of these gifts, you know, that we receive gifts like in shamanic journey, we receive these gifts and feel like sometimes they feel like an achievement. It's like, oh, I've learned something. Now I'm being given this gift, but I feel like it's simply because that energetic needs to be expressed through the physical. And so if we're at a place where we can hold that, like you're saying, you're holding the deer medicine, you're in a place that you can hold that with integrity, then it's you. You know, it's like you've come to the place in your journey that you can express this for the collective. I don't know, how do you feel about that, what I just said?
Yeah, yeah, I understand it too. I think identity can be tricky, right? Because any name you take can become also your identity. And so ultimately, we have to be careful. And I'm also very mindful of that. Uh, I mean, I don't really think of my name that often. I know it's my name, but it's not like I think of it, or I talk about it a little bit when people ask of it. I talk a little bit in the book because there was one chapter I thought was relevant to that. But like I said, and I've talked with wisdom keepers about it, and they say to be just mindful also that that doesn't become an identity. And the way you do that is to make sure that you focus more on the responsibility of what that is asking of you than what the name is about, or that than what it is it's calling, or what it is. Obviously it's asking you to walk a certain way, to be to have certain energies that move through you, and the way a, a certain animal is going to do things is going to be different than another one, but it's not better or less. It's just a different way, right? So I think that's what it's important. It's not, and I personally see it that way. It's not better this name than the previous one I had. It's not less, but it's not better. And I think it's very important to differentiate that, because for most people it's better, probably never less, but always like, this is better to have that name. I say, it's not better, it's not less. It's just a different identity. Like the ants is not better or less than a deer, or better or less than a river, or better or less than an eagle. Because the human mind has this construct that immediately placing into some kind of hierarchy. And it's just how we are built. It seems to be our design. Maybe there's a faulty part in that design. I don't know.
I think it's
But
colonization, but okay. Yeah.
I think humans, it's been a long time that we kind of seen ourselves a little bit. And I know it's because nature was difficult, because we're not the strongest and the fastest, and so we had to kind of survive out there in some ways. And I've been thinking a lot about that, when we are so separated from nature, not just recently, but from a long time ago. What really happened, that we are so afraid of it. But you're right, Western civilization and colonization and all of that really added to it. But I think it's important to look at it from a more animist perspective, or ancient perspective, which is we're all sitting in a circle. And that voice in the circles could be an ancestors, could be a river, could be the sun, could be an ant, could be an earthworm, could be an eagle and a bear, and whatever they want. And all of them are no more or less than their neighbors next to them. And it's funny, because when you think of animal, obviously as humans, we have when I say an eagle and an earthworm, and I ask people, who do you want to be? For example, your spirit animal, nobody's going to tell me I want an earthworm, right? And that's the human perspective on what power is about, what strength is about. So we want the eagle, the wolf, and the bear. So it's interesting to try to put ourselves into the energy of something that maybe is very small or very different from what we consider strength and power, and to then, from that perspective, see the power, but not power over, just power as, right? Like the power of the tree, the power of a rat, or they all have their own intelligence, and that, I think that's the beauty of it. It's, can I bring those lenses, experience for a moment, a brief moment maybe, or longer moments, those lenses, but not make my identity around it, not make definition of who I am around it, but never separate or never build power with the rest of the world. And we see other human beings that are not less because they don't have a different name, or they don't have experience of shamanic journeying, or even they are not spiritual at all, or even they might even disagree completely about what I'm saying. How do I do that? By staying in relation. I think for me, that's the crux. And that's really where we're at also, I think, with humanity today, that is very much about us and them in general. And that doesn't mean no boundary. That doesn't mean that every speech is acceptable and every behavior is acceptable. But it's for believing in some kind of common humanity beyond my gender, my skin color, my religion, my political parties, and my spiritual identities.
Yeah, because
Right?
they can create another hierarchy.
Yes, exactly.
There's like this, I love what you were saying because it made me think about something I realized about the medicine wheel, which is that it's got 4 quadrants, and the south, being like the connection, the instinctive center, the reptilian brain, the working with serpents in my tradition. And then in the West, we work with the limbic brain, with water, with jaguar. We're working with those emotions. We're transmuting those. And we're working with the hummingbird and the soul and the imagination in the North. And then in the East, we're working with eagle. We're working with the spirit. But it's a circle. It's like, and each quadrant is equal. So it's not like the eagle gets, okay, now you're at eagle, so you stay there. No, like now you go back down to serpent, you go back into the earth, you go burrow into the mother, you release those skins, you go back into the body, because it's the body, the physical body. So it's all equal, and that's something that I think is many spiritual New Age it would really help people to have this idea, so that we're not creating some kind of ladder to the sky. Like if we just
And that they are
human
not.
consciousness.
Yeah, and you're right, and that they are not also just more powerful animal because they are there represented, like snake, puma, and condor, for example. Many people think, okay, those are obviously very potent because they are on the medicine wheel or on the chakana. But really, my teacher, I say they just were the best representation for human beings to understand the connection to that specific part of the wheel. So
It's
our
medicine.
psyche,
Yeah.
right? It's medicine, right? They represent that. But he said there's all the other animals, and many are not, or most of them obviously are not on the medicine wheel. I mean, they are not represented most of the time, but they are as potent medicine. They just have a different function. But people prefer, to have a big anaconda or a puma, especially, or a condor, right? As a I don't know, work with that medicine, that work with maybe, I don't know, with turtle medicine or deer medicine even, or fox medicine or other ones. But it's not like that. Once we start putting all of that, flat on the ground in a circle, and really, how do I do that? Right? It's like literally a daily practice to try to experience this perspective and changing seats and knowing that nobody's better and catching ourselves, because we're always doing it, classifying and looking at the big oak tree instead of the tiny little nettle on the ground. And really remind myself that this is this, and it's the same, and it's very different, and they are as potent as medicine, and they are as a deep teacher as any others. For me, one of my biggest, I think, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, or over the past 20 years of studying transformation, has been to understand that the common trees in my garden are as potent medicine as what we call sacred medicine in the jungle. But because they are not maybe as studied as often, because Christianity went over Europe and kind of wiped all the witches and wizards, thousands of years ago, we have literally broken lineages and very, very few things still alive in transmission. We have forgotten, but it doesn't mean the medicine is not there waiting. And if I can get, and I've had that experience, especially with the oak tree, which is kind of my second favorite after the deer. It's kind of deer and the oak for me works really well together. But I had an experience of transmission and teaching and healing with the oak tree that were as powerful as grandmother ayahuasca ceremonies. And to me, that was a revelation. Wow, I can work with that tree that's in my garden, that I see every day, that's in most streets of any countries. And I don't have to go through something that maybe is more explosive and more intense and still beautiful and different, and still get a tremendous amount of transformation from something that is more silent, maybe not as fireworky or not as more rainbow. And I think in a world that's very loud, I would finish by saying that we might want to connect more to silent medicine or small medicine, or the medicine that we just pass by, the one that grows in our driveway, plantain and plants like that. I think they have a lot to teach us, especially today, because we are always looking for out there and big.
Yeah, the
And there
big
is
dopamine hit.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, and it gets crazy when you think that a plantain or a nettle or a dandelion, if you really start to be your teacher and say dandelion is going to be my teacher next year, for example, and you say I'm going to study that you're going to realize that you're going to go through as much healing and grief and transformation and awakening than a plant that is everybody wants to work with, that is in the Amazon, that start to really shuffle and kind of, sorry for the word, but fuck up with your mind. And I
Yeah.
think that's really good because it really challenge how we see transformation, power, what is wise, what is not, what is medicine, what is not, or what is more medicine than others. It's a really human perspective, because from the great spirit perspective, it's all is, and there is nobody ahead or below or under someone else.
Yeah, it's just the medicine that wants to come in. It's the medicine that wants to work with you at the time. And usually they invite you. So yeah,
Yes.
we do animal spirit guides for our program. Like every time we have a new program, we invite a new spirit animal and we listen for what that is. This time I was surprised that it was a plant. It was tobacco. And tobacco, I don't know if tobacco speaks with you this way, but tobacco said, let's cut the bullshit. And I was like, I like this idea. Yes, let's cut the bullshit. Like, please help me. I want to cut the bullshit. I want to be real, And so it was a very strong moment. And I thought, can I have a plant ally as a program ally? I never did that before. But if you're saying you're going to come in, I know I don't really have a choice. It is yes. So, I feel like the medicine comes in that's needed. And Coyote came a few years ago, and I definitely didn't want to work with Coyote. I heard enough stories about Coyote. I was like, no thanks. But Coyote literally walked down the road. A student was driving home on a 2-lane road, and Coyote went in front of her car and walked 2 miles to her house in front of her car. To let us know, no, it's Coyote, and you're going to work with me. It's like, and every student had an experience like that. So there's nothing you can say. You're going to do it. You're doing it. And you just got to say yes to it. And versus like thinking like we're using them. And you have so many good things. We could talk forever because your book is like, it just touches on the shamanic drum. It touches on trance. It touches on working with animals and plants. You're touching on going to the lower world, working with allies and talking to your ancestors and having an altar. You guys, this book is really a good primer for the, shamanic experience, your own personal shamanic experience. And I really loved it, Angell. It's a beautiful book. Thank you for transmitting it into the world for us. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people? I know that you do one-on-one work, you do group programs, you teach all kinds of beautiful things. You have Substack. You're always on Substack, sharing beautiful wisdom.
Yeah, I write a lot. Writing is where people can find me on Substack. They can, search Angell Deer. Obviously, if they want to read more, they can get, the book, Becoming the Medicine.
It's a cool cover too. I like it.
Yeah, Becoming the Medicine. But yeah, they can also go on my website. I do, year-long programs and teachings. I also do one-on-one with people. And I have a special program that I launched last year that is really growing really well, which is about sacred business, which is something that I really didn't want to bring to life for so many years. And people were asking me and say, how do we empower all those healers that are struggling financially with abundance, that talks about it but don't really know? I have an amazing gift. Like, I met so many people with incredible gift, but then they call you because they need $20 to pay for their taxi because they can't get home. And I was like, there is something really problematic if we only let power and money runs through people that are basically no devotion to the world, no devotion to humanity, that is all about themselves. And so I created also that program that is a way to approach business that is from all those journeys that I've done to really help people not just be in good connection to the natural world and spirit, but live well and serve their family and the community in better ways. That's also something I'm quite passionate about, that we all have our power.
Yes. And I actually did have an individual session with Angel. It was awesome. And in a way that just, I was really feeling the need for a sacred witness, and was very in some dark thoughts and feelings. And you were just really beautiful at holding space and allowing my tears to flow, allowing me to be present with you, and allowing the medicine to come through that needed to come through for me. And I often think about the advice you gave me, and I sit there and I do it, I do it. And it made a difference, connecting in with my roots. So thank you. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Kerri.
Yeah, really good healer. Yeah, good sacred witness. So I recommend Angel highly. I recommend you get his book. His book is fantastic. You'll learn so much from just his stories and the way he shares things. And think you'll really enjoy it, everyone. And I'll put the links in the show notes below. I did find it on Amazon. I also know it's on Balboa Press, which is your publisher. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you for coming and spending time with me and with the audience, and sharing your heart and your wisdom and your grace. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, too.
And thank you, everybody, for sharing and for staying till the very end, because I know the kisses are coming and you're waiting for them. I like to give people Reiki kisses. You can join me if you want to. But here they come, everybody. Thank you for staying. Please share this out, like, subscribe, share it with everybody who think could benefit from it. And here come the kisses. And I love you all. I know. That was a lot of Reiki kisses. And we'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show, everybody. Bye for now. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake, Show. Take a sip from the drip of the nectar, from the source of who you are.